Welcome to Serge's webinar, Weak People, Strong Teams. We're glad you're here. If you'll bear with us, we're going to give people a minute or two to sign in. While we wait, I'd like to invite you to find the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar there. We'll be using this function for the interactive question and answer portion of this webinar. I see we have more of you joining us. Welcome. We're glad to have you here. This is a Serge webinar on the topic of weak people, strong teams. If you're new to Serge, we're a Christ-centered, grace-based ministry committed to gospel renewal and mission. This expresses itself through gospel-centered resources, mentoring of ministry leaders, and the sending of missionaries across the globe. My name is Laura Morgan, and I work on Serge's renewal and member care teams. As a faith-based organization, Serge holds to the biblical value that God works through our weakness. As a global organization, we work largely within team capacities on fields around the world. And so we recognize that the ability of weak people to function together as strong teams is both challenging and vital. And so one thing that we do is to provide resources that can help you grab hold of the gospel in ways that impact your leadership and transform your team dynamics. At the end of this webinar, we'll tell you about a few of those resources, including Tony Giles, our speaker, who serves as Serge's new church coaching specialist. We'll also tell you about a timeless book from Serge's founder and about our disciple training program, which is currently taking registrations until this coming Monday. Don't worry about taking down this information now. We will come back to it at the end of this webinar. And I'll also announce at that time the topic and the speaker for our October webinar. A couple of housekeeping items. As noted earlier, we will use the Q&A function in your Zoom toolbar during the question and answer portion of this webinar. You can ask questions as we work through the content at any time. Please note also that you can mark the questions anonymous if you desire to do so. Just click the box you'll see in that Q&A box on your screen. Tony will spend time at the end of the webinar fielding your questions. You'll also notice that there are chat and raise hand functions on your screen. We won't be using those functions today. More of you have joined us. It's good to have everybody here. So I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Tony Giles. Tony recently joined Serge's staff in a part-time role developing church ministry leaders through individualized coaching and shepherding. He also serves as a pastor at Cornerstone Presbyterian Church in Franklin, Tennessee. And prior to that role, he served for almost 25 years as associate pastor at Trinity Presbyterian Church in Charlottesville, Virginia. For 10 years of that time, he served concurrently as director of undergraduate ministries at the Center for Christian Study. He's committed deeply in his ministry life to influencing leaders. And he says his life was transformed by the gospel during his first pastorate when he encountered the renewal ministry of this organization, Serge. Tony, I'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks very much. Let me just say good morning or good evening, wherever you are. As you gather with us, we're grateful for the technology. We have had a couple of little issues getting set up here today, so pay attention to that, and we're going to trust that this technology holds and that we can walk together in this topic together. I chuckle a little bit just with the label specialist. I have a friend who told me that he spent 8 weeks in training, and he came out after 8 weeks being a demolition specialist, and it didn't prepare him for any or all that he encountered in warfare. But so enthusiast might be a better word. This is certainly a topic I love. I've been on dozens of teams, like perhaps many or most of you, some from sports to parachurch to local church. I have failed. I've watched others fail, and like you, I've watched some teams do well and accomplish great things. I've watched a few struggle and regroup and fade. And the fact is, I think I know more now than I did 20 years ago, 2 years ago, or even 2 months ago. We're going to have some slides rolling in just a moment, but before we get to those, what I want to do is give you a few preliminary observations that could have warranted a slide, but for the sake of time, I just want to walk through these to set the stage for the conversation that I hope that we can have together here. The first is this: weakness is a reality to acknowledge and embrace rather than deny or hide. I love what Paul Tripp said recently when he said and wrote, "Weakness is not what you and I should be afraid of. We should fear our delusion of strength." I love that. It's right in line with what another Paul said once. "So to keep me from being conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from being conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I'm content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." That's the starting point for this. We are weak people. It is not in us and because of us that good things happen kingdom-wide. But one of the things that we recognize also, and here's the second observation, that kingdom work is best done in teams. Not all kingdom work, but much kingdom work is best done in teams. Some can be done individually, but when you scan the pages of the New Testament, particularly, you see teams at work. Paul was a team leader. Paul reached the world through a team of believers committed to ministry. We see that in Romans 16, where he writes, "Greet Priscilla and Aquila, my co-workers in Christ." In Philippians 4, he refers to these women who have labored side by side with me in the gospel, together with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers. In 2 Corinthians 8, he refers to Titus as his partner and fellow worker. And then later on in Titus, he writes of Artemis, or Tychicus, Zenas, Apollos, and all who are with me. That's the picture that we get. So weak people, how do weak people form strong teams? Let's move through the slides. And the first one I want to start with is, for our purposes today, what do we mean by team? And here is an attempt at setting the table for that. A group of people committed to a common purpose who choose to cooperate in order to accomplish an agreed upon task. You can go a long way with those words, and every piece of that definition is significant. It's important to remember that agreeing to work together and choosing to cooperate require both a willingness to cooperate and a skill. Those words and some of that definition come from a man named Pat McMillan. I want to say right off the bat that a lot of what we'll cover in the next few minutes is from Pat McMillan and his good work at Triaxia Partners. I first encountered Pat as a seminary student when he talked about teamwork and ministry and how those work together. And I'm citing freely and happy to acknowledge that his book, The Performance Factor, is something that underlies a lot of what we will talk about today. The Performance Factor, Unlocking the Secrets of Teamwork by Pat McMillan. But that's one thing. The reality is that weakness is always going to be exposed in teamwork. Teams are made of weak people. But here's another critical piece to our conversation, and that is, it's not a team because you call it a team. Some groups never get there. In fact, Pat suggests or observes that his estimation is that 60 to 70% of groups never become teams. I've noted that myself. I've been on some of the teams I've been on have really been groups. And I think that's a fair and helpful question to think about. Are we a group or are we a team? And how do we move from group to team? There are stages in that. Not all of these occur on a timeline, but it's always a good, helpful diagnostic question to ask, where are we as a group or as a team? The difference basically actually between a group and a team is that a group is additive, whereas each individual adds one more component with the same amount of output the individual could produce alone. But when a team occurs, when a team develops, there's synergy, and there are greater results with each individual contributing to a whole and moving together. The issue there is really alignment. The issue is how aligned are we in what we are doing? Are we committed to the same things? And we're going to come to some of the different characteristics of the team in just a moment. But there's a basic group. There's an adolescent team. That's really the first stage toward teamwork, where your focus is on getting to know the other team members, their strengths, weaknesses, unique contributions to the team, and through their knowledge of the process of sharing, trust builds, as does willingness to subordinate an individual interest to a greater possibility. The core issue there is trust. The learning team is one where you're learning how to cooperate more effectively. That's where the team begins to openly discuss the processes or the skill areas, and they determine how they can cooperate more effectively. And then what Macmillan calls the high performance team is that where everything is clicking, everything is on all cylinders, there's flexibility, there's adaptation, able to respond to the things that are going on well, a very purpose-centered work together. The next slide begins to underscore the different elements of the team. And that is a common purpose, clear roles, accepted leadership, effective processes, solid relationships, and excellent communication. Let's move through those a little bit at a time, just so that you can get an idea of what we're talking about here. The common purpose is the reason for cooperation. Until there's a task, there's no need for a leader, there's no reason for a team, but what is the purpose that we have aligned ourselves around? That's what defines the team. A purpose that's really clear and compelling, that gets me out of bed, that energizes me, that I step into with energy and purpose. And the alignment that we're talking about is not something that happens quickly. It's not something that happens simultaneously. It happens one person at a time. So the ultimate question is each member of the team aligned behind and with one another in a common purpose? The next element is, next slide, clear roles. Do I really understand what my part of our job is? Roles that are compatible, that work together, that complement one another. There's some interdependence that goes with this. We're dependent on one another. And there you see that synergy come about as each one of us bring clarity and purpose, stepping into how God has made us, into the particular job description. This is a great point where somebody's convinced me that every volunteer and every team member needs a clear, precise job description that has some flexibility, but it spells out real clearly what is my job, my part of our job. A common purpose, clear roles, and accepted leadership. Yeah, there's a leader involved. Every team has a leader. There can be co-leaders, but what we're talking about is one person or two committed to that purpose, whose job is to influence others to accomplish that purpose. We're going to talk a little bit later about, as time allows, just the critical role of the leader. Just want to make sure that you understand what we're talking about here in terms of team is the team members embrace this. They look to the leader for the final word or the clarity. The leader's job is to continually hold before the team what that common purpose is and to attend actually to all these different elements. That is his or her job to keep things front and center. But the critical piece there is accepted leadership, where you don't have people going in different directions, serving their own ambitions or their own interests, but coming together around the common purpose with a point person who is leading the way. So common purpose, clear roles, accepted leadership, and then effective processes. How do we work as a team? How do we get things done? How do we make decisions? How do we move forward together? These are Macmillan's words, where he suggests that we are always mapping our processes. We need to make them visible so that it's clear how something is done. And then we master them. We always want to make them better, to continually ask, how did we do and what lessons did we learn? In my mind, that's really an ongoing, constant, where we're paying attention to assessing how are we working as a team, not navel gazing and not losing perspective, but always just checking our pulse, just saying, how are we doing? What could be done better? And the best practices on that are often just taking some time out periodically during the course of the year, or maybe more often, but at least annually, just evaluating how are we doing with the things that we've set out to do. The next element. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to give you an example for as a team meeting. So a team meeting needs to have a clear purpose, specific objectives, need to stay on track, people come prepared, follow what occurs, and allocate time for the various things appropriately. That's the kind of thing that the best meetings in my mind are those that have a roadmap. When you sit down to work as a team, you say, okay, here's why we're here today. Here's what we need to do. It means delegating things. A lot of the best team meetings are those that includes clarification, communication, and coordination. Decision-making sometimes gets bottlenecked in a team meeting, and we've all been there. And there's where a leader needs to say, let's assign that task to someone and come back with a recommendation on that particular issue, but just moving things along. The next one, you knew this before you signed on. A team that works together well calls for solid relationships. And there's that many more different features. Creates the climate for cooperation, trust, understanding, respect, and courtesy. And you knew that. Just a reminder of how critical and vital the little things can be that go a long way to building a team. The next one is excellent communication. And that just simply means that we have to always be thinking about how are we communicating? Are we listening in order to understand versus listening to respond? Clarification, choosing the right channel for the right message. Something can simply be done with an email. But there are times when the team needs to gather around and work through some things together. Conflict is inevitable, as you know that too, and it just means you're communicating. You need to be ready to move quickly to address issues that arise, to remind each other that we're on the same page. Basically, what you just heard works anywhere, any place. The corporate world, the academic world, wherever you are involved in a team of some sort. But the question really before us today, I wanted to give some focused time to, is what difference does it make, and how does the gospel serve as really what I've just called an engine for all of this? How does the gospel, rightly understood and applied, shape the way we move into all of these? And it starts with the notion that the gospel is a power. Paul uses those words in Romans 1. to talk about the fact that the gospel is the power of God for salvation. In Colossians, he talks about the gospel bears fruit. It is at work. It is changing things. And so the question that I've asked is, how does the gospel change the way we function as a team? How does the gospel inform and drive each, in this case, each of these 6 components? So I want to just think with you about that a little bit as the slides roll. As we move forward, gospel as engine. We've talked about that. How does that address a common purpose? What is our common purpose? You can have your own answers to these. They may be more specific with a specific task in front of you, but at the heart of it all is that we are in this to serve the one to whom we belong, that our common purpose is his glory. It is his work in the world that we get together and lock arms around, to love him, to love one another, and to extend his reputation into the world, and to see hearts and lives changed by the gospel. Ultimately, when we talk about the teams that most of you are on, that is at the heart of the common purpose. Now, when you land in a particular area or particular geography or a particular task, you will have a more specific common purpose. And it's the job of the team leader or the mission or the ministry or the church to help you clarify that. What is our common purpose? Why are we doing this? Until there's a task, there's no reason for a leader or a team. But what is the task? And that's a task that should be articulated frequently and clearly and compellingly. We're continually reminding ourselves of why we're doing this, what the end game is, what the end result is, what are the steps along the way, what are the markers to indicate movement and progress, but what is our common purpose? Where are we going with this? Clear roles. We understand that we are stewarding gifts. Each of us designed and uniquely made in specific ways. We want to have a sober-minded assessment, is what Paul talks about in Romans 12, not thinking too highly or too lowly, but every job matters and yours is significant. And if I can embrace that, what it exposes or counters, it helps avoid the jealousy or pride or maybe sometimes the feeling insignificant. What is my role in what we are doing? Accepted leadership. We know that leadership is derived. It is assigned by God, appointed by God, and that goes a long, 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 long way for us understanding and embracing the leadership. We want to see our leaders succeed. If you're a leader, you want to see others succeed. But one of the things that and you've all been there or seen it at different times, there's a kind of murmuring or opposition or discontent that can surface apart from the gospel and the Lord's work in our lives when we step into the structure that is before us, that we understand is the mechanism and the tracks we run on is along with the leadership that's in place. The next one is processes. We want to do things well. We want time well spent. We want to be effective, and we see that in the gospel, that effectiveness comes when each part is working properly. We're serving the Lord and not men. And when I recognize that and embrace it, it avoids the half-heartedness that sometimes marks our work, sloppiness, or even what I've observed, and many of you have too, working in silos. And that is not a team, but a group of individuals. Solid relationships. There's a lot that we could say there, and you can fill in as much as you know from your own life, but the gospel changes the way. The one I want to just focus on there is Paul's language that we are partakers of grace together. When that flavors and colors the way a team functions together, we're looking together, we know that we are drinking in, taking in, living off of grace together. That goes a long way toward the benefit of the doubt. It avoids tolerance and gossip or unresolved conflict. And what you've no doubt seen it sometimes is just an agreement to say, well, we disagree, we're not going to be friends, we're going to settle into something less than solid relationships. But when that occurs, the team suffers, and the gospel addresses that, creating a climate for cooperation. Excellent communication, just let your yes be yes, being honest, being direct, listening for understanding, versus making assumptions or miscommunicating in any regard. That's a quick run through just the model. What I want to suggest is the groups do not always become teams. There's some language, McMillan suggests that, sometimes you've got a group of individual stars that are gathered together, a team of experts, which is neither a team nor expert. You may have a confused crowd that want to cooperate, that want to see good things, but they're not sure what their role is, what their direction is. And at worst, you can have people who are on the same team who are really, in McMillan's words, warring factions, who are really moving away from each other. On the cover of the book was a picture of a crew team with oars in the water, and they're in sync with one another. They're aligned together around a common purpose. That really represents a lot of what we're talking about. How does the gospel then do its good work to align us, to set us in a direction together, with a common purpose, with clear roles, with accepted leadership, effective processes, solid relationships, and communication? The gospel can do that. I've seen it and continue to see it. Those characteristics, those features actually serve as a diagnostic. When a team is not functioning well, you can almost trace it to one of those, almost always trace it to one or more of those things that need attending to. And all of them need attending to all the time. There's hardly an occasion where we have arrived. We're always in process. We're always dependent upon the Lord. But God has chosen to use people gathered together around a common purpose for His purposes, for His work in the world. That, in a nutshell, is what this is about, as an attempt to kind of lay the table for some discussion, for some application in our own lives, recognizing that we're totally dependent upon the Lord in all of these good things, to knit our hearts together, to form us in a way. I remember Paul's words about spiritual gifts. One of the things that he says when he uses the body analogy, and he implies, is we actually need those people that are most different from us, not that are most like us, to function well and to equip the body for service and to grow to maturity. That has changed the way I've thought about teams and individuals. I really need those that are different from me to collaborate and to cooperate in these good things. Just a reminder, the words that are really important to all of this is that it's a choice that we make to cooperate together, and that requires a willingness and a skill both. Macmillan suggests that willingness precedes skill. We're always learning how to do it, but the people that learn how to do that are the ones that are eager to learn it, that are eager to cooperate. And so as a team leader, some of you leading teams, that is part of the task. It's to get the right people around the table or on the team in order to walk together in these good things that the Lord has called us to. I'll pause there and move to the next little section for Q&A. Laura?
Thanks, Tony. Sorry about that. I'm sitting here just awed as you speak and thinking about even the function of our team that works to prepare these webinars that are going on. Tony, you said earlier on, we've had some technology. There have been other technology things happening behind the scene. I know that some of you have not been able to submit questions anonymously, though I have received some anonymous questions. So don't know what's happening with that. We'll carry on with what we have. I think for most of you, I will not click to display these questions. I don't believe you can see them on your screens, and I will continue in that mode. So if you want to try to submit something, you can. We do also have some questions that were submitted by email in advance of this webinar, so I will read some of those as well. So we'll carry on as best we can here. Here's a question, Tony, obviously from a leader. And it says, how do you lead when you don't feel gifted as a leader, or maybe you feel you're not able to lead a particular effort which you've been assigned or has fallen to you?
That sounds like me. That is certainly not an unusual kind of set of questions that run through anybody's mind. I do think the bottom line is getting down to the center of understanding calling. What is my calling? What is my vocation? What are the gifts and abilities that the Lord has given me? Leadership is obviously learned. I do think it is a gift as well, but leadership is something that can be learned over time, and with coaching and with intentionality, coming alongside others. Part of what I would urge in that setting is to have that conversation not only with yourself and the Lord, but with someone else, someone that you trust, someone that you sense cares about you, that could come alongside and help you think through, what is it that leaders do? How do I grow in the particular responsibilities that are there? I think over a period of time, if you're asking that question continually over a long period of time, it could indicate that that maybe you're not. I don't want to suggest that, really. I think if it's a question that you continually stumble over and come to, what if I'm asked to lead but I'm not a leader? I think what I would probably suggest, in addition to talking to someone who could serve as a coach, would be to think about different models of leadership. There's different styles of leadership. And I wouldn't conclude too quickly that I'm not a leader because I don't look like the leaders around me or the leaders that I look up to. Think through the different leadership styles and embrace your own and grow and continue to look to others for encouragement and the suggestions about how to move forward with the things that God's called you to. I think I answered the question or addressed most of that.
You did. That's great, Tony. Thanks. This is a question in a different but similar vein. What wisdom do you have for moving across multiple teams in different roles? For example, leader, member, advisor.
What was the second one?
Member. Leader, member,
advisor. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a part of the clear role piece. And then what is my role on this team? And if I'm called or asked to lead a particular team, I shift in that direction. If I'm called to serve as an advisor, on the other hand, stay in your lane and to recognize to speak when called upon, or to ask the questions that you're asked, or to ask permission to give input if that's what it's called for. I think it's just a matter of recognizing that you really want to see other people succeed. I think if you carry that across the different opportunities, whether it's leader, member, or advisor, if your real ambition is to want to see other people succeed, and I think that's really the right frame of mind and posture to take, you serve by leading in one case, you serve by participating in another, and you serve by advising in another. So there's where the servant leadership model or label actually is helpful. We serve in a lot of different capacities. It might be as a leader, it might be as member or advisor. But the thing that I think maybe holds all those together is your longing and desire to see that team be effective in what the Lord has called and set it up for. And you just simply take the role that you have been asked or assigned.
Yeah, I love that, Tony, thinking about staying in your lane, but I think that's quotable, and yet you really rooted it deeply in that coming out of love for the team and the other members of the team, or participants in that team, whatever their roles are and whatever your role is. So,
well, leaders always have a lot of great ideas and how the way things should work in their own mind, but I always need to be a little skeptical of how wise I am, and I need the benefit of others. So even as a team leader, I think sometimes it's recognizing what can I do as a leader to move us forward, not simply telling people what to do and when to do it, but where does the wisdom come from? It comes from paying attention and attending to what others bring to the table as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. We have a couple of questions that are that have kind of a common theme to them. So I'll give you one of them, and we'll cover several by doing that. If your group has tried to become a team unsuccessfully, how should a leader attempt to move the group towards becoming a team? First steps, question mark. There was a similar question that was, what do you do if a team is not functioning correctly? What are steps to correct this?
Well, we started with common purpose on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that really is at the center. It's the centerpiece. Those, by the way, those elements are not always chronological, but certainly in terms of priority, common purpose is the starting and end point, of a team, of teamwork. So if I've got a team that's not really functioning as a team, part of my role as a leader would be to diagnose that and to assess it and to figure out with others where is the breakdown. What are the things what are the barriers? What is keeping us from functioning together? Is it one of the elements that we talked about, or maybe something else? Is it solid relationships? Is it clear roles? Is it common purpose? What is hindering us from moving from being a group of people assembled around a task, even a group of experts, into a team that works together and actually enjoys working together? What are the roadblocks? So I think the first thing is assessment. It's just to diagnose and to pay attention. And I think you just got to do whatever is required for you to get enough information. So maybe it's talking to team members individually, sitting down with them and getting their input, and letting them speak into this in a safe environment where you're saying as a team leader that you need their help to diagnose and to kind of assess things. So I would say that's a first starting point, would be setting aside time to be intentional about assessing things, paying attention to that, going back to the group after maybe meeting individually and saying, here's what I'm hearing, here's some common concerns, here's some issues. And as a leader, being willing to own up to any place along the way where as a leader, maybe you've missed something that you should have attended to. By the way, I think I said earlier, but I think it's the leader's role to attend to all of those elements, to pay attention to those constantly, and asking the question and helping the team ask the question, how are we doing and what can we do better? And that's not a weekly conversation so you don't start every team meeting with that question, but having periodic timeouts, assessing things, at least annually, looking back and looking forward. And if you uncover there's issues that need to be addressed, finding a way to address those, assigning some some of that responsibility to someone, or taking it upon yourself to get some answers, and then moving together, assuring that that you really want to see this team grow in the right direction. And that just takes time and intentionality, prayer, certainly, but being purposeful in paying attention to how we're functioning.
Yeah, I think as you talk there, Tony, and as you described gathering the team to actually talk about where might the challenges be, it strikes me as a beautiful image of modeling exactly what it is you're trying to lead the team toward in itself. So there are lots more questions coming in. There's several questions related to multicultural team settings. How might the 6 elements of a healthy team apply in a multicultural team setting, also in outside of a Western context?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be limited in what I can say about a non-Western context because my travels have been few. But I will say, at the heart of it all, regardless of the culture, teamwork really depends on the ability to get on the same page. There can be all kinds of differences, cultural, geographical, personality types, but how do we align? That really is the key issue. Can we get, and it depends on what the task is. Sometimes it can be addressed with a task force where there's an event. When Billy Graham came to Nashville, right after my college years, there were people from all over the middle of our state that gathered together with all kinds of differences, but they were so committed to an event and what would precede and follow that denominational differences were laid aside, and the movement together to see something good occur did. I think you've got to pay attention to the differences, be sensitive to them, to ask a team member if they can align themselves with the purpose of this particular team. You don't want to always be going back and asking that question months later, going on the front end, a common commitment to a common purpose, theological differences. Where will they surface? When will they become significant in the ability to function together as a team? Frankly, I guess that's why we have denominations, that an ability to circle around a particular statement of faith or particular mission allows a team to move together. I think you just have to attend to it, pay attention to the different personalities, the different understandings, and determine if they can align around what this team is all about.
Mm-hmm. There are several questions now, Tony, from members. They would be from members connected with if you're a member of a team and you recognize that the team is functioning as a group and not as a team working toward these 6 elements, how as a team member do you help to push that group more toward being a team?
Yeah. Gently is the part of the short one word answer to that, and purposefully and courageously. I can wrap all of those together. I think it probably would call for finding the right time and the right moment to approach a team leader and say, "Hey, can we talk? I've just got some things I'd like to talk about." And I think the way that works is when you come with observations, not accusations. Team leaders, believe it or not, are sometimes insecure, in the role that they have been given. And the fact that they're a named team leader really doesn't ensure all the things that they would be doing, all the things that they might. There are some team leaders probably that recognize what they have as a group of experts or something like that, and they don't think about team. And I think in a case like that, to ask the question gently and purposefully, but with some examples. I think that's always a helpful thing. If your supposition is that we're really not a team, we're really a group of people, to maybe able to give some examples of why you think that, and to offer those as considerations for a team leader. Say, would you be willing to think about this? And I don't want to step out of my lane, but I think as a team member, but I have some observations that are at least moving toward concerns, if not concerns. And a good team leader will want to hear that. Good, and any team leader needs to hear that. So I think it's a matter of knowing the person, knowing the leader, knowing how to do so. I think it would be better one-on-one. You don't have an intervention. They call the team leader into a team meeting and saying, let me tell you why we've called this meeting. But to do so in a way that he or she can best hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm. That's good stuff there, Tony. There's someone else has asked the question of how, and I think this is, again, in a similar vein, but a bit different, is how you address the sense of aloneness that can come with leading a team, and how can team members actually help leaders with this? I think some of what you said there applied, but it is a little bit different question, so I thought I would go ahead and pose it to you.
Yeah. I usually encourage leaders to have other leaders that they have locked arms with, not other leaders that they can talk to just about how are you doing personally, what are the challenges that you have. As a team member, I might suggest that of my team leader. Say, hey, do you get together with other leaders or other pastors and talk together about how things work? I would encourage that. I would promote it. I would ask that be provided for in some way. Is there anything that we can do as team members to make that possible for you to either get away for some time on a regular basis, to have significant conversations with other leaders? I think what I would want to do would be to, as a team member, to do all that I know to do and can do to let my team leader know I am for him or her and want to see them develop further and to flourish in the role that they're in. It can be lonely, and I think as leaders, leaders need one another. They need what I've called spiritual friends in their lives, somebody that knows who they are, how to pray for them, and they are praying for them. So that can be done. I've got friends that I do this with on email and or occasional phone calls that are not even in town. But I also have those locally, and that's vitally important that there be people that are regularly in my life, whether they're in town or out, that there's access with all the technology, and it's working well today with the technology that we have. That opens up another arena just for some regular, intentional gathering together and encouragement in this hard work of ministry.
Yeah, so vital. So I'm going to pose two more questions to you, Tony. There are two I don't want us to miss out on. So the first one would be, I know that you work, and I'm going to rephrase this from how it came in, but I know that you work with churches. You have worked with churches to deal with organizational challenges and team challenges and that sort of thing. So where there would be a large staff and a large pastoral staff, where there is not the trust and the communication that is vital, how do you work within those situations where there's deep misalignment, low levels of respect, trust, and cooperation? What's a good first step toward that?
Well, I think the first step is probably, for lack of a better word, what is the core leadership or the senior leadership I don't like that term necessarily, but in a large staff, there's usually a smaller group that are at the center, and it has to happen there. If it doesn't happen there, it won't happen outward. I would say the same thing to a pastor and his elders. It has to be going on in the pastor's life. It has to be going on in the life of the elders before it ever reaches the church. This gospel-driven centeredness that we are so eager to talk about and see. I do think it just needs to happen to the degree that it can happen. If you've got a staff, and I know there's some church staffs that are so large that that can't occur, but it needs to occur on the team level. So for example, let's say it's a church staff. The youth ministry staff includes several key volunteers, 1 or 2 staff members, and all kinds of others that are helping them pull off youth ministry. It needs to occur there. And that's where life is lived. There needs to be a genuine respect of the leaders that go beyond the sub team or the ministry team that is youth ministry, in my example. There has to be a genuine respect for one another. And that's just a gospel issue. And I think I don't want to miss out on the fact that what we're talking about today ultimately is the work of the gospel in our lives. If I have trouble respecting a teammate, that's my problem. And the gospel addresses that problem. And I can own that. I can't insist that you own that, but I'm responsible for who I am and how I live and love and serve those that I'm working with. So if I have difficulty respecting a team member, trust is earned. We all know that. I may respect you before I can trust you. I won't trust you unless I respect you. And so I think you just think about how does this grow? What does love look like? And the leader needs to recognize and be aware if trust does not exist on the team, then that's something, again, a gospel issue. Let's think through, how do we address mistrust? How do we confess and ask for forgiveness where we need to? But we're moving toward a solid trust of those people. When a new team member shows up, he or she wants to trust everybody, but that takes time. That takes relationships. That takes being in the battle together for a while. That includes keeping short accounts with one another, of moving toward instead of away from others on the team. It's always, what Paul says, and this is a different, larger topic, but when Paul addresses difficulties in relationships, he says, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all. In my mind, that means it's not always possible, but it's always my move. And if it's a team member that I don't trust, that's a gospel issue in my own life. I want to be willing and able to move toward him or her to be as full of love. It's just an aspect of love. I may not trust you, but I am to love you. And I want to trust you as we live and learn and serve side by side.
Mm-hmm. You know, Tony, I said I would give you 2. The other question, actually, I think you've answered, even as you talked there. It was connected with, what do you do if you're the youngest, you're the leader and you're younger than everyone else? What do you do if you're a female and you're the leader and it's predominantly male and you're feeling some disrespect? And I think as you've talked there about moving toward and not moving away, and some of the things that you've said just apply so applicably to that as well. So I think we really covered it. I would invite you, do you have some closing questions that you would, or some closing comments that you'd like to?
Just as I thought about the title of Weak Teams, Weak People, Strong Team, the question of strength is something that is at the center of it all. What is our strength? We need to own the fact that we are weak, that we are sinners, we are going to mess up, that we don't have to be defensive when we drop the ball, when we miscommunicate, when we do an end run. We need to be caught up on that, brought up on that, and address those things. But I thought long and hard about this whole thing, that weak people are who we are, but that doesn't stand in the way of us working well together and loving one another. But what is our strength? Our strength is not in our innate abilities or even our God-given abilities. We do have strengths and weaknesses, but the scriptures make so plain, and these are actually Nehemiah's words that you'll recognize, that the joy of the Lord is our strength. And when Nehemiah said that was after the wall had been built. So mission accomplished. Our strength and our joy is not just from the fact that we are doing well as a team or that we're having fun along the way. Our strength is found in the joy of the Lord. That becomes central and vital to my own individual life, as well as what does it mean to collectively, collaboratively, intentionally partake of grace together. So the joy of the Lord can serve and should serve us our strength. Joy is found in a person. And when that occurs on a team, when a team finds their joy in the Lord and is reminding one another of where joy is found and where strength is found, it's in Christ. We can say with Paul, this is how one should regard us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. For what we proclaim is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, with ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. His identity and purpose were wrapped up in who he was in Christ. That changes the way I function, whether I'm leading a team or a member of a team. My identity is not in my performance. My identity is certainly not in my job description. My identity is in Christ. And because my identity is in Christ, I can move into things that are hard in ministry, knowing that there's joy in the Lord who is with me. He's with us. We will fail. We will stumble. We may not be the team that we want to be yet, but he is committed to us. We are committed to him, and he is our joy. With that at the center of it all, we can expect some good things to happen, even if they take longer than we would hope.
Thanks so much for that, Tony. I mean, I think in my own life, my own roles, my own the many teams I serve on, the ministries that I'm a part of, I need to be reminded of those things today. So thanks. Tony is, as I said, working with Serge in church leader development. He's in high demand these days, but you can learn more about his work on our website at www.serge.org. Additionally, I'd encourage you to check out our disciple training curriculum. Again, it's accepting registrations for the fall class until this Monday, October 1st. Your teams will benefit from your disciple training as your own gospel underpinning is strengthened, and as you learn to shepherd from a gospel-centric place, just like Tony has been talking about. You can go to the mentoring tab at serge.org or watch for a follow-up email with the link tomorrow. We'll also provide you with a link to a book of timeless leader encouragement and wisdom from Serge founder Jack Miller. And I will include a link to the video of this webinar and also a link to Pat McMillan's resource, which one of our attendees asked about. Our next webinar, scheduled for October 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern, is focused on how to give the gospel to teens. You can see the registration link listed there on your screen. We'll include that in the video, in the email that you'll receive tomorrow as well. In this webinar with author Kristen Hatton, you'll get guidance and language for debunking the false identities that teens tend to rely upon. And you'll be better equipped to help them understand how the gospel rescues them from those counterfeits and returns them to their true identities. Again, we'll include the link for that in tomorrow's email. We'll include all of the things that I've committed to you that we will include in that email, so watch for it. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about Serge, other resources, future webinars, and the areas we serve around the world, you can find information at www.serge.org. As always, it's been a gift to be with all of you today. Thanks for joining us.